I think this might be a moderately unpopular opinion, but I feel like the Game Awards last night was relatively solid. From a production standpoint, I thought the show was on point, but there's been a bunch of discourse about this goddamn award show, and you know me, I like to yap about it, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, first and foremost, to the shock of absolutely nobody, Mario Kart World ended up taking best sports slash racing game, and I've seen a lot of conversation around this topic, so let's go ahead and jump right into it.
And the winner of Best Sports Racing Game is... Okay, there's no fucking way you're getting this. Yep, Sonic is not getting shit. Is there anyone else who's eligible? What the hell? The winner is Garfield.
I wasn't even nominated, but...
Sonic Twitter and Sonic fans, I am so sorry. We got utterly beat last night. From the obvious snubbing of Sonic Movie 3 from being nominated to losing in basically every single category, even though there was only like two where we had a chance in. And on top of that, despite multiple statements by Sega, it seems like Sonic and really any other Sega property that people actually care about, not this you Warhammer heads, okay, or you Ace Combat heads, but the general consensus of individuals felt as if one of Sega's more popular, more active franchises would have been revealed today based off several statements they made over the course of the last couple of years. Now, for you Ace Combat heads and you Warhammer heads, I'll give you your flowers. I hope you guys enjoy the two games that were revealed today. But for everybody else, I could understand the disappointment. Me personally, I always know to come into these shows with very limited expectations, so that way you can never be disappointed. And I think I walked out of here with a solid number of games that I am actually moderately interested in playing. We have the Orbitals, the early 80s anime type aesthetic duo Switch game. We got the Gang of Dragon, Nagoshi's new game, and I'm telling you, leaving your own old job to make a game that's almost the same, at least aesthetically, to what you've made in the past is kind of a crazy layup. Stupid Never Dies. I really love the aesthetics present within the little animated trailer they had beforehand, but I'm not sold on the actual gameplay. We gonna have to get there. And then I wrote down in my notes Raccoon Panda. It was the first real game revealed, and it just looked interesting. I messed with the gimmick and the little twist at the end of the trailer. I kind of feel like I am thoroughly enjoying where it's going. But anyways, those were the couple games that I walked out of here that I specifically noted down, as I am interested in seeing these titles more in the future. And for an award show of this caliber, that's all that you could really ask for. Now, okay, back to the main topic. Sonic lost everything, and I see a lot of conversation around this, and by extension the rest of the award show. Let's talk about it. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that these award shows are mostly decided by a panel of judges, right? Gaming journalists, 90 to 10 split. Now, 90 to 10 to a lot of people, right? Me and you, it sounds quite drastic. However, if you want to see something, a purely fan voted award show, look at the VMAs. Look at the VMAs. Because the VMAs have almost always been consistently nothing more than popularity contests. You think a smaller game would ever get nominated and would ever even be in the conversation of winning literally anything if it was entirely or even majority up to fan votes, right? The critics, whether you like it or not, are probably more than likely the best group of individuals to assemble a list of nominees on top of probably deciding the best one. Now, they can get it wrong some years, especially when we see that gaming has shifted to become more and more Hollywood, like you see it a lot, and a lot of celebrity appearances in some of these games, along with the more emphasis on cinematography and storytelling. And unfortunately, that does hurt some people like me who mostly judge games based off their raw gameplay capabilities. And when you see games that are primarily known and celebrated for their story, being The Last of Us 2, sweep awards, it kind of puts a little sinking feeling in my heart, because I personally believe that there were better gameplay games presented that year. But that's just how the industry shifted. Understanding industry politics is not just important for the Game Awards, but for really any award show. And this kind of ties into the next thing I want to talk about, the Expedition 33 sweep that we saw last night. Because boy, oh boy, listen, gamers have always proved to be the most sensitive group of people I have seen in my life. Now, for the record, I did not play that game. In fact, my agreement was that I would play and beat Expedition 33 if it won Game of the Year. So I am thoroughly excited to be able to delve my feet and hands into that game and come to my own conclusions about that game. However, I've seen a lot of people talk about this idea that the Game Awards need to add some type of policy to prevent an award sweeping the entire show. And my response to that is, have you seen any award show on this earth? And this is not me defending the Game Awards, but truthfully, if there is a product that exists that is truthfully good enough to win every award it was nominated for, why should you have a limiter put on your head because you made a quality product? That sounds so ass backwards to me. And people say commonly that, okay, well, the Game Awards are meant to highlight gaming as a whole and to recap over the year. One, let's get it clear. It may be that way, but this show is primarily put together, sponsored, and held together by advertisements and people using this as a platform to promote their next games because this is the biggest gaming event of the year, right? That is the main focus. That is the main promotion of this award show, okay? With that aside, when you look at other games, other industries, other things of that nature, does the Grammy have a policy in place to prevent artists from sweeping? We just watched last year Kendrick Lamar walk on stage and dog walk everybody who put out a nomination because of his beef with Drake, right? And I think the songs were good. I think he deserved a lot of the awards that he won. But objectively, should he have been penalized for having an amazing year because someone felt that he was winning too much? Do you not realize how like sensitive and stupid that shit sounds? Now, we do end up having situations like Team Cherry decided not to show up because they're like, hey, we're gonna get swept by Expedition 33. Now, they were right, except they got one. But they were right in their reasoning to not want to show up, and that's unfortunately part of the game with these award shows as a whole. I truthfully think the only way that in the future the Game Awards could probably prevent a scenario where one game sweeps everything that's nominated for is to have more genres and more portions of games be recognized, okay? Why the fuck is there not dedicated categories to representing some of the extensive amount of games that are made each and every year? Why do we not have a visual novel category? Because let's be honest, most of these games that constitute as visual novels are not getting nominated for fuck all, and they're a big part of the year. Visual novels take so much time and effort, and whether you like it or not, they are still recognized as video games, right? And then you also have weird cases like Dispatch, a game that came out earlier this year but only recently wrapped up its whole narrative, meaning that it's at a disadvantage to everything came out because of the game's release model. Deltarune is another example. When that game inevitably finishes, is it going to be eligible for nomination in that year that whatever Toby Fox finishes up that game? Or is it going to be doomed because the game originally came out in 2018? Like what do we do here? I think the Game Awards needs to have more outright guidelines, okay? I think that we should probably potentially look into classifying games based off budget, because Expedition 33 has received a lot of valid questionable concerns regarding some of the awards that it was nominated for and won, primarily the indie game category. However, the indie game category is a little bit asterisk because Expedition 33 had a lot of funding put into it by its own publisher. And a lot of people will bring up the point, okay, well, Hollow Knight Silksong also coasted off of millions of dollars they made from base Hollow Knight sales. Hades 2 had the same thing where they had the bulk of Hades 1 sales to make another game off of. And I understand those arguments. However, it does definitely come to the conclusion that above all else, I think the Game Awards need to, one, have actual outlines for each category, two, have actual rules for submission. If a game is supposed to be an indie game, you have to have a budget less than XYZ amount of dollars. You have to have a certain team under this many staff members. I think if they actually had qualifications for each category, that would go a long way, especially when we have dumbass instances like Shadow of the Erdtree getting nominated for Game of the Year last year, only for the game to not win anything. It almost feels like that Jeff Keighley just wanted to throw a bone to suck off From Software. Again, how could he have prevented that from being an issue? I don't know. Maybe make a best DLC/expansion category to celebrate the games that got another update, or anything like that. Cyberpunk Edge Runners, Phantom or Liberty Pain, whatever the fuck that expansion was. If that game could have been eligible for the best update of the year award, That would have been great. That would have been a nice way to draw a middle ground, because now are we going to see in the future other games be considered for Game of the Year just based off the fact that it's a DLC, meaning that they had a whole base game to work with, meaning that you have to buy 2 parts to gain access, because Shadow of the Erdtree is not a standalone example. If Xenoblade 2 Torna DLC got nominated for Game of the Year, I would at least understand that, because that had a standalone physical release, even though I personally feel like you cannot really enjoy Torna without having the back whole context of Xenoblade 2. But regardless, if you aren't getting my point, I'm essentially advocating for more categories for other games to be represented. Realistically speaking, I think that is probably the best case scenario to alleviate and help everyone across the board. And in fact, knowing how these shows operate, you know, the limited time frame, Jeff could easily take these categories and shift them over to the pre-show. Okay, we could definitely cut down on some shit like Best Family Game, which is almost always going to be dominated, or almost always going to be dominated by Nintendo and some other game that might have come out of here. Like, let's be honest, why is there 2 Lego games in nomination for this? Why? It is Mario, Donkey Kong, Sonic, and 2 Lego games that nobody cares about. Like, come on, we could diversify these categories and add more. If you don't want to show them on the main show, fine, move them to the pre-show. Maybe give me more of a reason to watch the pre-show before the main thing, because you're not going to have anything good, right? But other than that, I feel like from what I've heard and from what I know and from what I've seen at Expedition 33, I'm not shocked that it swept. I'm shocked that it swept as well as it did, to the point where almost to any game that came out, I'm sorry, you came out when one of the most celebrated games of all time. Earlier in the video, I talked a lot about industry politics and understanding how the market space looks. And when you understand that, then you get to understand why some of the decisions are made. Okay, it's kind of like the Grammys last year. Okay, I keep pulling the Grammys comparison because the Grammys, right, also is a show that has a panel of judges. And I promise you, if these award shows were as rigged as you think they are, you don't think Nintendo would have bought consecutive awards? You don't think Nintendo would have bought an award for Xenoblade 3? One of their more nominated games? Because personally, I think Xenoblade 3 should have at least walked away from that Game Awards with literally anything. You don't think we would see more instances of that? You don't think we would have seen Sony win year after year, even though they won a couple of them? You don't think they would have won that year that, what was the game? It Takes Two won? If these awards were really bought. But it really comes down to the panel of judges and how they look at things. Understanding how the industry looks is a big part of the judges' decision-making process, at least in my head. Again, I don't have any evidence to go off of. I'm kind of spitballing, but this is just how I choose to interpret things. What did we see the big thing from this year? Number one, 3 of the games nominated for Game of the Year, and 2 of the games, or really 3 of the games that were pretty much the most predominant across all the categories, were indie releases. Even if I personally align myself with the belief that Expedition is like indie asterisk, right? You don't have a budget. Like, I'm not going to talk about it, but again, what has been the main theme for this year? We've seen a lot of established dev teams break away from their major companies because of all the cancellations and poor treatment to form their own studio and make their own game. The biggest announcement, and by biggest, I mean the last announcement of the night, was literally the people from Titanfall, who made Apex, deciding to reveal and leave EA and make their own individual game. So all that in mind, knowing that Expedition 33 was in part made by people who left Ubisoft, made by people that they found on random forums of the internet, you don't think that that would make a compelling story enough to really impact someone's decision for why they should award a game of the year? And I get that people say, oh, well, you have to be unbiased. Hey, let me break something down to you. There is not a world on this earth where people are going to be able to be fully 110% non-biased. That's not happening. I hate to break it to you. Everyone's going to be biased to an extent. Now, it is best to try and acknowledge and minimize those biases whenever you can. However, it's not always going to happen. That story alone, right, is enough to want to propel that game, to might look at that game in a more favorable light. Hollow Knight Silksong, that game that has been teased for 10 years in the making. You don't think some of that anticipation would potentially impact someone's review or thoughts on that game? Like, for example, if I felt as if Hollow Knight Silksong was a good game but not worth waiting 10 years to play, I would probably end up looking at the game in a more negative light, thus impacting my decision to vote for it for a certain award. You get what I'm saying here? The industry politics, right? And the trends in the industry are probably some of the things that people really don't account for in this space. And it's questionable. It's very questionable. But those are my takes on the Game Awards. Overall, I thought it was a pretty solid show. The Miss Piggy bit kind of went on for a little bit too long, but I thought it was cool. I really loved the Divinity, whatever the Lothlorien Studios game. I thought a lot of the trailers this year, I love when they played around in the crowd. It really helped me feel a little bit more immersed. We didn't have too many corny bits, and I know the Miss Piggy one, I thought it was a little bit endearing. I thought it was like, okay, that's a little bit cheeky. I like the little song and dance they did at the end of Jeff being like, yeah, y'all not getting Kingdom Hearts 3. It's not on me. Wham, wham. But yeah, for the future, I really recommend people tampering their expectations when it comes to going into the show. Now, Mega Man getting a job was low-key crazy. I was there for the Blue Bomber. But outside of that, I'm pretty whelmed. I enjoyed myself last night. I do have the VOD of me watching the Game Awards. That should be coming up pretty soon. But go ahead and let me know down below. What do you think about the show? Do you think certain things was robbed? Do you think certain things was snubbed? Yeah, and I don't know. Stay safe. We just big chilling, bro. We just chilling, bro. Yeah. I'm out.